Knights were many things during the Middle Ages. They were cavalry, they were shock troopers, they were law enforcement, they were pillars of the community, and they were even elite bureaucrats. But one thing they were not were conscripted criminals. Then what is Conqueror? Their trailer says quite plainly where they come from.
In desperate times, conscripted criminals refill our ranks.
But this never happened in history. A conscripted criminal could never be a knight. So what on earth are the Conquerors? Who are they in history? We're about to find out. Welcome to Heroes in History, where we take a look at all the For Honor heroes and discuss who they are based on in history and better understand just who they are and how well they're represented. Today we're talking about Conqueror, the first heavy of the knights, and a total paradox. From a thematic standpoint, he makes sense. He's a criminal who was conscripted to fight for the knights, and after proving himself in battle, he's been granted the title of Conqueror. He's given a flail as his weapon, which is also fitting, as they're dangerous to not only the enemy, but themselves. And so, if it damages the user, it's no great loss, because again, they're criminals. But as I've said, this didn't happen in history. How did one become a knight? Well, there were essentially two ways of becoming a knight in the Middle Ages. One was through serving another knight as a page for 7 years, and then as a squire for another 7 years, and apprenticing under them until you could eventually take the oaths yourself. Another way, and the way I want to focus on, is valor in combat. A soldier who proves their mettle and worth in battle can be knighted to honor their deeds. It's this practice that we can possibly attribute to the Conqueror. As the trailer says, those who are worthy earn their name.
The most elite earn their name. Conquerors.
This likely means the Conquerors had to earn their title, otherwise they're just conscripts. Which brings up another problem. Conscription. Medieval feudal states rarely conscripted citizens to fight. Consider for a moment what a feudal land is. It's land owned by the nobility and worked by the peasants. The feudal lord owns the land and profits off the labor worked on it. If he conscripts peasants to fight his wars, then who works the land? If you're an invading army and you see your enemy sending out peasants to fight you, you automatically know there's a problem. You don't want to kill peasants because you need those people to work the land for you once you take it. So conscription was very rare. Usually you had designated soldiers and troops to fight for you, not a draft like you would see in Mulan.
By order of the Emperor, one man from every family must serve in the Imperial Army.
And then there's the flail. While there is historical evidence to suggest that the flail is a real weapon, it was likely a rare weapon used for various reasons. For one thing, the flail is highly dangerous to the user. The swinging heavy ball has the potential to bounce off the target and hit the user, or a misswing could hit the user's knee, side, shoulder, or head. The shield Conqueror carries is good defense, but it's not entirely reliable. Plus, the flail isn't that powerful compared to something like a mace or a sword. Shadiversity has a good video where he discusses this, and I'll link it in the description, but you're not getting much power from a flail. All the power in the flail comes from the momentum of the swing, not the force.
How essential is that? Because especially if the chain hits something that's going to absorb momentum. The other thing is, because there's no solid haft, okay, holding that weight in a direct line, that as soon as that force hits, there's nothing behind it to kind of drive that force home, and it can be deflected much, much easier. But if you are hitting something, say, like that you're holding with a shaft, so, okay, the best probably, comparison to a flail is a mace. Generally not as much reach, you have far more control over it, and when you strike, you can put your weight, okay, and your strength into that strike much, much more. And when it comes to combat, there's this thing called kinetic linking, where you use the friction and the weight and your stability that you have in your stance to kind of push off, and that creates energy, pressure, force that you're able to transfer into your arm and then into the weapon, into the target, increasing force. You won't get any of that with a flail at all, because there's no solid connection between the actual striking portion and the area in which you're trying to generate all the force, okay? It's just the momentum and the weight of the striking portion, the head, by itself. You do not get to employ any of your own weight and strength apart from just accelerating it and swinging the thing, so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be as effective as a mace.
Consider for a moment swinging a baseball bat. When you swing, you're getting power from the rotation of the hips, the placement of the feet and the twisting of the body. This power goes through the entire bat and carries through in the follow-through of the swing. But a flail has a chain attached to the end of a shaft with a heavy ball on it, which is used for striking. This chain disconnects from the shaft so that energy from the hip rotation and body position can't transfer into the ball. It can only come from the momentum of the initial swing, not the power from the rotation. Even if you follow through, some of the power it had is lost as the momentum has been interrupted by making contact with something else. The only good thing you get out of a flail is the ability to strike around blocks, as the instinct of a warrior is to block the hard shaft of the weapon and not the ball, which can swing over and around weapons and shields. But to me, that's hardly worth it if you're going to be using a weapon that could very easily bounce off your enemy's head and hit you too. In almost every way, from his backstory to his weapon, the Conqueror does not add up. So just who is Conqueror? I have a theory, but it will take Conqueror's story in a different direction. Throughout medieval Europe, you often had a problem with highwaymen and bandits. This is where you get stories like Robin Hood from. These bandits would, at times, form communities and bands that would take out roads and territories near the feudal lands and then attack caravans and travelers to steal their wares and make off with them.
I've been robbed.
Of course you've been robbed.
As a general rule, these bands liked to stay away from cities or areas where the feudal lords would hunt them down, but sometimes that wasn't the case. Remember, conscripting wasn't really a thing you wanted to do, but hiring a band of cutthroats and highwaymen to go and attack specific territories and villages for you? That's a different story. It's not a feudal lord's fault if some bandits happen to rough up his neighbor's village. That's just the nature of bandits. They hit where they like. In fact, look at the Conqueror's trailer. He's in a burning village in the trailer, like he was just hired to go and sack it. Now, the problem here is that he wouldn't be a knight. Feudal lords who hired bandits and mercenaries like this often wanted to keep a wide berth from them. They'd pay them in secret, or at the very least let them live in exchange for their services, and leave them be. But the weapons and arms the Conqueror gives us another hint as to where they come from. The helmet and armor look similar to First Crusade armor, but there's simply not much of it. It's very poorly made and in some cases poorly constructed, and it looks beaten up at times. It might have happened that some bandits stole armor for their own purposes, and the leaders of those bandits might use that stolen armor to help them stand out. That may be where this comes from, but this is hardly great armor to be used. It looks more like the kind of armor you'd get off of a theft, or maybe something you took off of someone you killed. As for the flail, while this would likely be a silly weapon for a bandit or highwayman to use, it goes with the idea of live you get rewarded, but die and you're no great loss. The flail is a clumsy and dangerous weapon, but it truly does embody the idea that you're worth the same to me alive or dead. You choose how you walk out of it. Very much the phrase I'd expect to hear from a highwayman the more I think about it. Maybe the conquerors aren't the real criminals in the feudal age. Maybe it's the feudal lords themselves who are the real criminals. But then again, that's feudalism for you. Sometimes the feudal lords take matters into their own hands and play with people's lives under them. Not all of them, of course, but a fair few. But yeah, that about wraps up Conqueror. Sorry that this one was so short, guys, but I mean, there's just not a lot to talk about. I think that we could definitely say with some degree of certainty that that's probably what Conqueror most likely is. He's probably based on highwaymen and bandits of the feudal age. In fact, if you look at some of his armor sets, they're called things like Bandit Lord. I think it goes without saying that there's a really good chance that the Conqueror is a bandit or highwayman. Not as cool or amazing as some of y'all probably expected, but that does seem to be about what the Conqueror is historically. So, who next, guys? Do I keep going with the Knights, or do y'all have someone else you want me to look at? Leave your suggestions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that like button so that I know how much y'all enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.